In today's video, we're going through a hypothetical scenario of potential significant changes that could be impacting on the Toronto Maple Leafs should they not have the playoff success the team is looking for this offseason. Obviously, Marner Shanahan's on an expiring contract. Could the president of the team end up elsewhere, and could that team then become a big player for potential UFA forward Mitch Marner? We'll discuss how that scenario could unfold. Plus, could Matty Knies be an offer sheet target in Toronto? We'll take a look at that. The latest on Sam Bennett and his contract negotiation with the Florida Panthers. Potential big changes in the offseason for the Buffalo Sabres. We have some signings, and the Oilers are now suddenly facing some significant injury updates with both McDavid and Draisaitl out. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. First, we have a few signings. We're going to get into some injury updates, roster moves, and then a lot of the speculation for the offseason, which will follow here in a few minutes' time. First up, we have a signing in Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild have signed prospect defenseman Stevie Leskovar, who's a 6'4", 215-pound D, getting a 3-year entry-level contract. He was originally drafted in the 6th round back in 2024. So he gets his ELC. Obviously, he's had a pretty good draft plus one season to earn that contract. And the Detroit Red Wings have also signed Edward Trailmarks to a 1-year, 2-way deal as well. As I mentioned, the Edmonton Oilers find themselves looking at some pretty significant injuries to deal with here in the short term. Thankfully, it doesn't sound like any of these are going to be super long term, but we do have some big updates. Of course, last night's game saw Leon Draisaitl miss, and then Connor McDavid got hurt, and Stuart Skinner also got hurt, had to leave the game as well. And of course, one of the players that picked up at the deadline, Trent Frederick, is also still out as well. So the latest here, McDavid is looking, was supposed to be having some additional imaging done today. They're staying day to day for right now. Same goes for Leon Draisaitl. Coach Knobloch said it could be about a week or so before they're both back. Hard to say, but I guess, it shouldn't be too bad. But right now they're in a real dogfight in the playoffs. I mean, I don't think they're in any danger of missing the playoffs, but as far as where they finish in the standings, there's a lot that could move and a lot that could change. It could finish anywhere first, second, or third in their division. I don't think they're in too much trouble of having teams come up from the wild card race to knock them out of a spot there. But, whether or not they're in first, second, or third in their division could have a major impact, not only on who they play, but if they even have home ice advantage. Right now, they're trending more towards being a third-place team, the way they've been playing as of late and dealing with all these injuries. If they have some more losses here, if the supporting cast can't pick things up, it could just make things that much more difficult for them to get into the postseason with, obviously a lot of momentum, and obviously could impact who their opponent is. Right now, it looks like for the 4th straight year, they just might end up matching up again with the Los Angeles Kings, which will be interesting to see if we see anything different. Hard to say. But McDavid and Draisaitl both out, expected to be out for around a week or so. Stuart Skinner, who was pulled last night as well after having some head contact in the crease, was pulled by the concussion spotters. Knobloch says he is okay. Doesn't sound like he's going to miss time at this point. And Trent Frederick, who they acquired from the Boston Bruins ahead of the NHL trade deadline, still expected to be about 2 weeks or so away from being able to get back into action. Other injury updates and roster moves around the league include Detroit dealing with some more injuries. Eric Gustafson's going to be out for a while, and they say it's going to be a longer-term injury. Not sure if he's going to be able to return before the end of the regular season or not. There's not a ton of time left. So on an emergency basis, they've recalled Brogan Rafferty as well as Austin Watson. They do have a very big Western swing here coming up, where they're going to be playing some key teams out there that could have a major implication on their playoffs. If they go, can go through the stretch and come out with a streak of some victories, then they'll have a much better shot at getting in. But if they lose one or two of those games in the 3-game trip, that could have substantial implications. Right now, Detroit is in a situation where they're got a few teams to jump over. They're obviously quite a ways behind Ottawa, and now they're, I think, 3 or 4 points. I don't have the standings right in front of me, behind Montreal as well, and with other teams like the Islanders and the Blue Jackets fighting in there as well. So it's not looking good for Detroit. They need to go on a heater and quick. And right now, between the injuries and the schedule and the road trip, it's just not lining up well for them. So we'll see how this goes here. The next few games could be a major telling tale for how the rest of the season is going to go for Detroit. And Vancouver, some bad news there. They've got a longer road trip coming up here as well. Philip Hedl not entering that trip as well. So, of course, we know he's been out in concussion protocol, and the fact that he's still not able to come back, hasn't been too long, but, it's been a few days here. It's just not good. I mean, we know when he was with the Rangers, he had approximately 4 different concussions and certainly missed an extended period of time for a few of them. So you certainly have to be worried about him for sure. Obviously, not only the impact on the team, but at this rate, like Philip Hedl's had so much head trauma that you just don't know when it's going to be the last one that he just can't take anymore. So I certainly feel for him, and I'm not saying his career is over. I think that's very premature. That's not where we're going. But just that because of the history, there's a lot of concern here. And the fact that, he's potentially going to miss an extended road trip at a crucial point in the season, it's just really bad news for the team, really bad news for the player. So we'll have to see how things go for him. Obviously, if things do improve and he's able to play, he could always join the team on the road later, but not a good update on Hedl. The Minnesota Wild sent young defenseman David Jiricek back to the American Hockey League, so they are expected to get Jonas Brodin back for their next game. And that is all for the injury and roster updates for now. Another update as well on expansion. Expansion was a hot topic we talked about yesterday with the big rumor about a new owner wanting to bring a team to Houston. With Elliotte Friedman on his 32 Thoughts podcast, it was released earlier today. He feels Houston has an excellent shot at getting into the NHL, obviously the biggest market in North America that does not have a team. So the NHL has been wanting to figure out this, making it work. They have a natural rival there with the Dallas Stars. So, there's lots to like. He said that expansion fees right now, he thinks could be close to $2 billion. I've seen other reports suggesting at least a $1.5 billion fee. And if you look at what other teams have sold for recently, you're looking at a pretty close to an average. Like the average NHL valuation is pretty close to $1.5 billion right now. So you're not going to get less than that for sure. I mean, like we saw, like when the Penguins and the Senators, when they were sold like about a year or more ago, they were just shy of $1 billion. We've seen other teams since, be valued at around 1.5. So, obviously it's not going to be less. So we'll see what happens on that front, but $1.5 to $2 billion expansion fee is likely what we're looking at, according to Friedman. And he feels that there's a pretty good chance that we do get 2 teams. And it's even possible that NHL might announce, plans for 2 teams at the same time, but not expected that they would enter the league at the same time. Of course, we don't know when it comes to getting their buildings ready and all that, what kind of timelines they'd be looking at. It would be expected that the most likely other city, like we talked about yesterday, besides Houston, would probably be Atlanta. And, well, of course, like there's multiple groups there as well. I know when it comes to Houston, like we talked about Tillman Fertitta being the main one that's been rumored to be the owner for some time until this new group come along. But Elliotte talked about that as well, indicating that essentially when Fertitta's talked to the NHL before, he's expressed interest to own a team, but he was not willing to pay anywhere near the type of fee that they're looking for. So that's why things have never progressed on that front. I believe that he was looking to pay even either similar or less than what we saw the Vegas and Seattle expansion fees be. So probably at most $500 million, so about $500 million. And well, with everything, the way things have gone in the NHL since those teams have come in, the NHL is not going to entertain a fee that low. So that's why, things have never progressed. But he also feels like with this new group coming in who don't have, a team in Houston right now, that clearly putting up a new building for a hockey team could be, obviously the building itself could be viewed upon as being a major competition for Fertitta, who owns the Houston Rockets, right? At one point, it was believed that maybe we'd have a joint tenancy between the NHL and NBA franchises. They could share a building. Obviously, with different ownership involved, that would be unlikely to happen unless Fertitta somehow did get involved. But his name has been brought up more recently, again, because of the other group that's obviously been kind of piqued his interest to kind of maybe see if he can get back involved. Because like I said, if the new arena comes to town, a brand new facility, they're going to be competing for a lot of other different events and things that could be hosted there. So, I'm not sure if there's any possibility those two groups work together or not. But obviously, lots of interest there, which is good. Friedman, like he said, but he feels it would be more likely that you wouldn't see both teams enter the league at the same time. It'd be at least a year apart, maybe more. Just depends. You don't know exactly how long that would be. So we may not even get a scenario where the NHL announces, that they're expanding by 2 teams. We don't know that, but that's the speculation that they go from 32 to 34 and see, because a couple of things. For one, obviously, with expansion drafts, teams would want to have a little bit of time in between to kind of prepare for, losing another player, right? And then, of course, on top of that, they're worried about the talent, saying that, obviously, if there's a year or two in between, it gives another, crop of drafted players able to join organizations and just increase the overall skill and talent in the NHL. So, if they're really having any concerns about the talent level being diluted too much, then they probably shouldn't do it. But yeah, we'll see. I think they like to have things even, clearly, and I think having things staggered has its benefits for a variety of ways. You get more different revenue coming in for the league, multiple years. You get teams being able to kind of, not lose too much at one time through expansion drafts and all that. So there's lots of things and benefits there to staggering things if that's the case. Now, lots of updates as well. One from Friedman, which we'll get into here in a second with the Sabres, and then a bunch of updates regarding the Leafs and then Sam Bennett and the Florida Panthers. So Elliotte Friedman on Sirius XM satellite radio on the NHL channel was talking about the Sabres and brought up a very good point. And this has been a comment we heard from GM Kevin Adams himself earlier in the season, saying that if the Buffalo Sabres didn't have a good year and missed the playoffs yet again, that, there was going to be consequences. He's like, missing the playoffs is not acceptable, and it's going to bring consequences if it happens. So raising questions like, Elliott's looking at the fact of, is Lindy Ruff going to be back? Will Adams himself be back? He's had a fairly long run there now as GM, and the team is no further ahead than when he first took over. I mean, we've had multiple coaches come and go. They hired Lindy Ruff last year, to me, purely on nostalgia. To me, based on what we had heard and seen, it didn't seem like they really did any kind of real search to determine who would be best. We knew Lindy Ruff was available and clearly has lots of history with the organization in multiple facets, and one of the greatest coaches to ever coach that team. And I think they kind of brought him back hoping to kind of rekindle some of the glory days, but obviously that has not really ever come to be. Even their glory days, unfortunately, has never had a championship, but there was a point in time when they made the playoffs a lot more regular and frequently and had some good runs there during in the Buffalo Sabres organization. But it's been a long time. We're going on 14 years now that they haven't made the playoffs. So, I mean, clearly we're looking at, things like, behind the bench and, in the front office, if there's going to be changes there. And then, of course, we talked before about, could we see more trades? We saw a big deal between the Sabres and Senators swapping Cousins for Norris. Obviously, you get the future of Golly Bo Byram needs a new contract. Lots of speculation that he wants a bigger role, and they may not be able to provide that. So either they sign Byram to a big deal and let him play a bigger role. Do they move a guy like Power? I mean, there was some speculation about Rasmus Dahlin, which has been clarified now to be at a point where Dahlin says he wants to stay, which I do believe that to be the case. Although I do think it's possible that his patience might be running a little thin, and if we get too much further into this and things don't change, then I do wonder if that becomes a real thing. Lots of talk around J.J. Peterka. Could he be an offer sheet target? Obviously, I don't think the Sabres really want to move him, but at the same time, he's a player that has great value. And when you're having a bad season and you're struggling and you need to kind of remake the team, they're going to be the guys that get a lot of the attention. So it's more of a case of other teams kind of calling and seeing what's going on there. But be interesting to see what happens with the Sabres this offseason for sure. I do think it's quite possible we do see some more significant change. Of course, Nick Kypreos in his latest article for the Toronto Star touched on a variety of topics. One was the Sam Bennett contract. Of course, he says that if Sam Bennett's going to stay in Florida, it sounds like from what they've heard, the negotiations are likely going to lead to Bennett getting it. That's if he gets a deal before July 1 in Florida, an 8-year deal, probably around $60 million, which would give him an AAV of about $7.5 million. If Bennett signs a contract with the Panthers for that much money, I think they can kiss Aaron Ekblad goodbye. I don't think they're going to be able to retain Bennett and Ekblad both. And I do think Bennett would be prioritized, given the age difference and just how much he means to the team. Not to say that Ekblad doesn't. I just think where he's a little later stage of his career, different role, I think they would have an easier time trying to replace him. Whereas Bennett to me is just a very unique kind of player that would be tougher to do. That's just my opinion on that. But I do think Bennett would probably be a priority more so than Ekblad. Of course, there's a possibility, too, that if he stays in Florida, if it signs for a similar number, but let's say that things take beyond July 1st to get a contract done, then he's going to lose that ability to get the 8-year deal. If it's a 7-year deal and the same amount of money, it's going to take his AAV from 7.5 up to 8.5. So there's certainly lots of motivation from Florida to get this done before, to give him the 8th year to bring the numbers down. From a cap perspective, and belief that if he hits the open market, he's definitely going to command at least that much or more money, considering Florida is one of the no-state tax markets. To give him the same take-home pay, teams are going to have to overpay and go up higher. So that's why that a lot of people feel like the odds are in Bennett's favor, that he's going to get what he wants, or close enough to it that he stays with the Panthers. But like I said before, his agent's also notorious for pushing things right to the UFA market, having him get a chance to speak to other teams and to really get a true sense of what his market is. So we will have to wait and see what happens. But according to Kypreos, that's probably what he's looking at, an 8-year, $60 million contract. If things work out with the Panthers, could be more if he ends up going elsewhere through free agency. Now, of course, Kypreos also touches on a bunch of Leaf-related topics. One talks about the future of Marner Shanahan, of course, which is also connected to the future of Mitch Marner to some degree. And Matty Knies is another name we want to take a look at here as well. That was not only touched on there, but also talked about on the Overdrive program with Hayes, O-Dog, and Noodles, as well as Mike Johnson, who was their guest. And Mike Johnson suggested that Matty Knies be a prime candidate to be looked after sooner than later. I've seen multiple Leaf outlets talk about this, saying that Knies is going to be a potential offer sheet target if he's not getting his contract done, ASAP. If they get it to the offseason and they get past July 1st and they prioritize all the UFA stuff over Knies, because obviously they don't have to worry about, technically they don't have to worry about losing him because they have the right to match any contract, but he's been having a real good season. He's proven to be a real good power forward. He's obviously going to be, 25, 30 goals, lots of hits. It's just a real good power forward type of guy, which there's not a lot of in the NHL. He's a little bit of a unique player and has proven to be a real nice, draft and develop type of story in Toronto. Clearly, they have every intention of wanting to keep him. I think they're quite pleased with him. But like I said, they've got some big decisions to make in Toronto, including some UFAs like Mitch Marner, like John Tavares. And, well, if they take too long to do Knies, and if they try to go the route of let's look after the UFAs because, they could walk a little bit sooner, and they kind of try to take the approach with Knies that, well, we're going to sign Marner, or we're going to try to sign Marner and Tavares, and basically you're going to get what's left over. That might be a bad approach if they don't leave enough there to really satisfy him and things drag on negotiating-wise, that he would be a prime target for an offer sheet. Clearly, they don't have a ton of cap room. They need to make things work. I understand wanting to get Marner and Tavares done so you have a better idea of what you can do with Knies because you're going to have some options. But, at the same time, if he wants a long-term big money deal and you can't get it, you're just going to, it could be impactful in the relationship. You just don't know, right? You want to obviously make him feel important because he's had such a great season. So I'm not sure what the order is, but if they leave Knies out there too long, an offer sheet is a concern. But the bigger story that Kypreos talks about here in his article is obviously the fact that if the Leafs don't see the playoff success that they're hoping for, it's a real possibility now that we're going to see the departure of President Brendan Shanahan. We know that Brendan Shanahan's on an expiring contract. That was confirmed and discussed at length in the off season. Of course, when MLSE got their new head honcho there, Keith Pelly, they had their big press conference with him and Shanahan and obviously Brad Treliving talking about all their plans for the season and all that. And we know that Shanahan they're taking a wait and see approach with him. So it sounds like MLSE means business to clean house or to do something drastic if things don't improve this year. So, the Kyprios article talks about the fact that if that doesn't happen, Shanahan is likely gone. It also talks about the fact that he feels that Marner Shanahan is going to have options to land on his feet extremely quickly, like we saw with Kyle Dubas. And he mentions two teams, the first one being the New York Islanders. Now, the Islanders are a team also kind of going through transition. I know the fan base wants to see change there. The fan base is kind of getting a little tired of Lou Lamoriello wanting a new voice and to see some real change. And I think they're going to get the change regardless of Lou comes or goes or stays or what have you. But one thing is for sure, they don't have a president above Lou. And it's been kind of speculated off and on for some time that could they go the route of hiring somebody. Well, that would be the type of role that Brendan Shanahan's used to. I don't see Shanahan being a general manager. That's not what he is or has been, so I'm not sure that that's really where he wants to go. But we do know that there's an existing relationship there with Lamoriello. So to me, a scenario might be, we know that Lou is obviously quite up there in years, likely not going to be around too much longer. There's a lot of people speculate it could be his final year. We don't know that. I mean, they've been pretty, low key of talking about his contract to keep things pretty quiet and secret on Long Island, to say the least. But, could we see a scenario where maybe instead of Lou departing, is it possible they could bring in Shanahan if he gets let go from the Leafs as a president and then have him maybe work with Lou, even if it's just 1 year on a short-term basis, that existing relationship can be rekindled and maybe they work together to help find the successor to Lou Lamoriello. I think in some ways the Islanders have, to me, there's more work to be done, and there's a few things they've done that I didn't agree with. But if you take a look at the prospect pool, it's getting better. They've made some good moves to certainly strengthen the prospect pool. They've made some moves, trading Brock Nelson. They're trying to get a little bit younger, but they still certainly have a lot more work to do. There's still some more veterans on this team I think need to go. There's talks that they may re-sign Palmieri. I'm not a big fan of that. You do need some veterans around, but I do wonder if we could probably see moves for guys like Pajot. Maybe Mayfield could be gone. That wouldn't be shocking. Even like I said, Palmieri to me sounds like they're going to sign him, so he's probably back. I wonder about Lee to some degree as well. Like there could be some, a decent amount of turnover there. And I just wonder if Shanahan going there, maybe they move on from a couple of veterans ahead of time. And we know that there's a big question mark on the future of Mitch Marner. And we've already talked about the fact that Lou has an existing relationship with Marner from his time in Toronto. If Shanahan ends up with the Islanders, like Kyprios suggests as a possibility, if Marner's not getting what he wants out of Toronto, if he pushes it, and we know that his agent is notorious for pushing it to get him into that market to really test his value, could Shanahan be the domino effect here that helps bring Marner over? From a tax perspective, I don't think there's a great deal of difference between New York and Toronto. So it really boils down to fit, preference, money, all that. So it's an interesting concept. We know that the Islanders could certainly use a big name coming in. The attendance has been down. They need to do something to kind of shake things up and to give a reason for the fan base to get excited. Even a big game like last night against the Montreal Canadiens, where they're in the mix for the second wildcard spot, attendance still not great. That fan base certainly looks like they need reason to be invigorated and excited. And getting a new president come in with a new vision and to kind of see the end of the road where we're going to see a transfer of business from Lou to the next general manager, bringing in a star player, it could really invigorate this team. They got a brand new arena. I'm sure ownership has its concerns about where they have to, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about money for them, and it just makes sense. So I do wonder if the Leafs go through a shakeup from lack of playoff success, could that directly result in guys like Shanahan and or Marner ending up with the Islanders? Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.